All right, today we are jumping headfirst into the pretty wild world of the spiritual teacher Osho. We're looking at his ideas from the book Danger, Truth at Work. And trust me, Osho was famous for challenging, well, just about everything we think we know about society, about religion, and even about ourselves. So let's get into it. Osho really starts with this massive question, one that kind of gets under all of our skin, right? We have all this incredible technology, all this information at our fingertips, endless philosophies, and yet so many of us feel deeply unfulfilled, just not happy. And Osho's point is, this isn't some new problem. Nope, it's an ancient one we've just learned to live with. So what's the deal? Well, according to Osho, the cause of all this misery is not at all what you'd expect. He argues that the real reasons are actually hidden on purpose. And what's hiding them? The very things we usually turn to for comfort and answers. It's a pretty radical idea, isn't it? That the thing we think is the cure is actually a part of the disease itself. And to really get this idea of hiding the truth, Osho tells this incredible story from when he was young. It's really the perfect metaphor for how he saw our whole society working. So picture this. In Osho's hometown, there's this disgusting, smelly sewer that runs right through the middle of the city, and there's a bridge that goes over it. Well, one day, Prime Minister Nehru is scheduled to visit. Big problem, right? So what do the local leaders do? They cover the entire bridge with these beautiful, fragrant mogra flowers to hide the horrible smell. But as Nehru's car gets to the bridge, a young Osho actually stops the convoy, pulls the Prime Minister aside, and says, "You need to see what's behind the flowers. This is the real city." And boom, that's his whole point in a nutshell. For Osho, that bridge, that's our society. We use all these beautiful concepts, things like honor, religion, patriotism, politics, like flowers to cover up the stench of all our suffering. We're just decorating the problem instead of actually cleaning up the mess underneath. So, sticking with this metaphor, Osho takes his first big swing at what he sees as the biggest, most fragrant bouquet of flowers out there: religion. He basically says it gives us these nice, comforting lies to explain why we're so miserable. And here's where it gets super interesting. Osho doesn't just pick on one side. In the West, you've got the story of original sin. You're suffering because of something Adam and Eve did thousands of years ago. The fix? Just be obedient to God. Then in the East, you have karma. You're suffering because of bad things you did in millions of past lives. The solution? Just suck it up and endure it to pay off your debt. Osho saw both of these as really clever traps. But Osho's take on this? It's way more direct. He basically says, every action brings its result immediately. It does not wait. If you put your hand in a fire, you don't get burned in your next life. You get burned right here, right now. For him, cause and effect are instant. This whole idea of punishment or reward way off in the future, it's just a story. And that's the real kicker, right? Osho believed that these big explanations, whether it's karma or original sin, they really only serve one purpose: to keep things exactly as they are. They tell people who are poor and suffering that it's all their own fault from some distant past, which is pretty convenient for the rich and powerful who might actually be causing that suffering in the present. Okay, so if he's tearing down all the old ideas, what's he offering instead? This is where his thinking gets really creative, starting with his whole take on ethics. He actually made up a word for his approach, philosia. It's a clever play on the word philosophy. See, philosophy means love of wisdom, which is about thinking. But philosia, from philo, meaning love, and sia, meaning to see, means a love of experiencing reality directly. It's all about seeing for yourself, not just thinking about it. And this way of seeing leads him to this really crucial distinction between nonviolence and respect for life. They sound similar, but for Osho, they're worlds apart. He saw nonviolence as a negative idea. It's about not doing something. You can practice it like a robot with no real feeling. But respect for life, that's a positive, active feeling of deep reverence. And if you truly have respect for all life, including your own, well, then nonviolence just happens naturally. It's not some rule you have to force on yourself. And to show you just how twisted this can get, Osho told this absolutely wild story. He described a Jain practice where, because they couldn't kill the bedbugs in their beds, they would hire poor people to sleep in the beds instead and get bitten all night just to keep the bugs alive. For Osho, this was the perfect, if horrifying example of an ideology of nonviolence that showed a complete and total lack of respect for life. All right, next up, Osho sets his sights on politics. And let me tell you, this is probably one of his most controversial ideas.
Get this. He argues that the politician and the criminal are basically the same person. The only real difference is their style. The politician is civilized. They use speeches and promises to get power legally. The criminal, on the other hand, is wild. They use illegal means to get the exact same thing.
So what's the connection? What's the one thing they both crave more than anything else? Simple: the will to power. Both of them are just driven by this bottomless desire to control other people. The politician just happens to wear a nicer suit.
To prove his point, Osho would point to someone like Joseph Stalin. Here's a guy who started out being raised in a monastery, became this quiet, low-level party member. But then, the second he got a taste of real power, he started systematically getting rid of all his rivals. He became a mass murderer. Now, we all know the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But here's Osho's twist. He'd say power didn't corrupt Stalin, it just revealed the criminal who was hiding inside him all along.
Okay, so he's torn down religion, he's torn down politics, so what's left? What's his actual solution for humanity? He basically breaks down all of our problems into two buckets. He said about 90% of them are outer world problems, hunger, housing, disease. These things, he said, can totally be solved by objective science. But that last 10%, that's the inner world stuff, our anxiety, our suffering, that feeling of emptiness. And for that, you need a totally different kind of science.
So his game plan is just radical. First, he says, forget the priests and the politicians. Let's focus all of our human genius on objective science to solve all those external problems. Because once we're all fed and housed and healthy, then, and only then, can we finally focus on the real challenge, developing a subjective science, using tools like meditation and awareness to explore our own inner worlds. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? He wasn't trying to cook up another belief system you had to follow. He was proposing a practical, hands-on science for exploring that final frontier, our own consciousness.
And all of this leaves us with this one last, kind of heavy question to chew on. Osho's whole deal suggests that the beautiful flowers of our culture, our politics, our most sacred beliefs, might just be hiding a pretty ugly reality. So, if our beliefs really are the cage, what on earth does it take to finally see the bars?